The station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between three dying stars. It was old, older than most species could remember. Its metal walls had seen 100,000 meetings, 1,000,000 arguments, and countless wars begin and end with words spoken in its great circular chamber. Park Do-yun stood at the entrance of that chamber and felt very small. He was not a tall man. His hair was gray at the edges, and his face carried the tired lines of someone who had spent 30 years talking to people who did not want to listen. Back on Earth, he had been a diplomat. He had negotiated water rights between nations, stopped small wars before they became big ones, and once talked a general out of launching missiles by sharing a bottle of rice wine with him until sunrise. But this was different. This was not Earth. The chamber stretched before him like the inside of a giant bowl. Thousands of seats rose in circles around a central platform, and in those seats sat beings that Do-hyun's grandfather could not have imagined. There were creatures of light and crystal. There were things that looked like floating clouds of gas. There were beings with too many eyes and beings with no eyes at all. Each one represented a world, and each world had been traveling between stars while humanity was still learning to make fire. Do-hyun walked to his seat. It was in the back, the very back. Row 4127. The seat was too small and slightly broken. He sat down anyway. The session had already begun. A creature made of shifting purple crystals stood on the central platform. This was High Speaker Vorath of the Velthory, and his voice rang through the chamber like struck glass. "The matter before us is simple," Vorath announced. "The hyperspace lanes connecting the outer systems remain under the control of the three elder races. Several younger species have requested redistribution of access rights. We shall now vote." Do-hyun understood what this meant. The hyperspace lanes were like rivers in space. Ships used them to travel faster than light. Whoever controlled the lanes controlled trade, movement, and power. For 100,000 years, three species had held that control: the Velthory, the Morath Collective, and the Syndicate of Krell. Everyone else had to pay them, obey them, or be left behind. That the younger species wanted change. They wanted fair access. They wanted a voice. Do-hyun pressed the button on his console to cast Earth's vote. A small light turned green. Yes, Earth voted yes. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the laughter began. It started with the Krell delegation. They were massive creatures, like walking mountains of gray flesh and bone. Their laughter sounded like rocks grinding together. Then the Morath joined in, their hive mind buzzing with amusement. And finally, the Velthory, their crystal forms chiming with what could only be mockery. High Speaker Vorath raised one crystalline limb and pointed directly at Do-hyun. "Look," he said, and his voice carried across every translator in the chamber. "The humans have voted. One world. One tiny, wet, unremarkable world. They have no fleet, no colonies beyond their single moon, no technology worth noting. And yet they vote as if their voice matters." More laughter filled the chamber. Other species joined in now, not because they found it funny, but because they were afraid not to. Vorath continued, his tone dripping with amusement. "Earth's vote is noted and dismissed. It carries no weight. It changes nothing. Humanity is a footnote in galactic history, and footnotes do not decide the future." Do-hyun did not stand. He did not argue. He simply sat in his broken chair and watched. When the laughter finally died, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small communication device. It was old technology by galactic standards. No quantum links, no faster-than-light transmission. Just a simple encrypted radio that bounced signals through a chain of hidden relays. He typed 3 words. They laughed. "Proceed." Then he put the device away and waited 12,000 light-years away, on a planet that most of the galaxy considered barely worth noticing. A woman named Yoon Somi received that message. She was sitting in an underground facility beneath a mountain range in what had once been called Korea. The facility had no official name. Those who worked there simply called it the Quiet Office. It did not appear on any map. It received no government funding that anyone could trace. For 60 years, it had existed in perfect silence, and in that silence, it had built something impossible. Somi read the message twice. Then she deleted it. She was not a young woman anymore. Her hair was white, pulled back in a simple tie. Her eyes were sharp and dark, and they had seen things that would have broken most people. She had given her entire life to this project, sacrificed family, health, and any chance at a normal existence. And now, finally, it was time. She stood and walked through the facility, past the laboratories where scientists worked on equations that bent the mind, past the medical bays where volunteers had their brains scanned after exposure to things that should not exist, past the vault where they kept the original recordings from the first expedition. She stopped at a door marked only with a single word, Sunflower. Inside, her senior staff waited. There were 7 of them, each one a genius in their field, each one sworn to secrecy until death. The ambassador has sent the signal, Somi said. The council has rejected our vote and mocked our presence. They believe we are nothing. One of the scientists, a young man named Kang Taeho, shook his head. They have no idea what we found. No, Somi agreed. They do not. And that is exactly what we wanted. She walked to the center of the room, where a holographic display showed the galaxy in all its spinning glory. 4,000 species, millions of worlds, trade routes and empires and alliances stretching across distances that made the human mind ache. And hidden among all of it, invisible to every sensor and scan, were 12 small ships. Human ships, each one carrying a device that could change everything. For 60 years, we have kept silent, Somi said. We discovered something that every other species missed. Something that drove the Velthari mad when they touched it. Something that killed the Mora scouts who found it. Something that the Krell declared forbidden and sealed away. She paused. But we are human. Our minds work differently. We see patterns where others see chaos. We find meaning where others find only noise. And when we touched the wound in space, when we looked into that tear in reality, we did not break. She smiled, and there was no warmth in it. We learned. The holographic display changed. Now it showed a single point in space, a junction where dozens of hyperspace lanes met. The Krell border system, one of the most important crossroads in the galaxy. In 3 days, Somi continued, Ambassador Park will request an emergency session of the council. He will give them a demonstration. And after that demonstration, no species in this galaxy will ever laugh at humanity again. She turned to her team. Wake the Sunflower. It's time to show them what Earth has been hiding. Back on Nexus Prime, Daehyun remained in his seat as the session ended. Other delegates walked past him without a second glance. A few made sounds that his translator identified as insults. One Velthari actually kicked his chair as it floated by. He did not react. When the chamber was finally empty, he stood and walked to the great window that looked out at the stars. So many of them. So many worlds. And every single one of them believed that Earth was nothing. He thought about his grandfather, who had grown rice in a small village and had never seen an airplane until he was 40 years old. He thought about his mother, who had watched the first human ship leave for Mars and had cried with joy. He thought about all the generations of humans who had looked up at the night sky and wondered if they were alone. They were not alone. They had never been alone. But now, for the first time, the galaxy was about to learn what that really meant. You laughed, Do-young whispered to the empty chamber. Remember that. When everything changes, remember that you laughed first. He turned and walked away, leaving nothing behind but silence and the distant light of uncaring stars. The year was 2289, and humanity had finally learned to break the speed of light that it had taken them longer than any other species. The Valkyrie had discovered faster than light travel when humans were still building pyramids. The Morath had spread across a dozen systems before the first human city had walls. And the Krell had already fought and won 3 galactic wars by the time Earth figured out how to split the atom dot, but humanity had done it. Slowly, clumsily, with too many failures and not enough resources, they had built their first FDL ship. It was ugly. It barely worked. The crew had a 50% chance of dying every time they jumped. But it worked. The ship was called the Magungwa, named after a flower that grew in Korea. It carried 12 crew members, and its mission was simple: go somewhere new and come back alive. Baek Ji-woo was the youngest member of that crew. She was 26 years old, a physicist who had grown up in a small coastal town and had dreamed of stars since she could walk. Her grandmother used to tell her stories about spirits that lived in the sky, about dragons made of light that swam between worlds. Ji-woo had thought they were just stories. She was about to learn how wrong she was. The Magungwa's jump was supposed to take them to a nearby system. 3 light years. A quick hop. But something went wrong. The calculations were off. The ship tumbled through folded space and came out somewhere else entirely, somewhere that should not exist. When Ji-woo opened her eyes, she saw darkness outside the window. Not the darkness of normal space, which was always filled with distant stars and the glow of cosmic dust. This was true darkness, empty, absolute, a void where nothing existed, nothing could exist. And in the center of that void, there was a tear dot. It hung in space like a wound in fabric. Its edges rippled with colors that human eyes could not process. Sometimes it looked like a crack in glass. Sometimes it looked like a door. Sometimes it looked like a mouth, opening and closing, waiting to swallow anything that came too close. The ship's captain, a man named Oh Sang-woo, ordered an immediate retreat, but the engines would not respond. The tear was pulling them closer, slowly, gently, like a current in deep water. The crew began to panic. Some of them screamed. Some of them prayed. The ship's doctor sedated himself rather than face what was coming. But Ji-woo did not panic. She stood at the window and stared at the tear, and something strange happened. She understood it not with words, not with equations, but somewhere deep in her mind, in the part of the brain that processed patterns and dreams and stories, she felt a connection. The tear was not just a hole in space. It was a scar, a wound left behind by being so old and so powerful that they had fought a war across dimensions, across realities, across time itself. And when they had destroyed each other, they had left this behind. A crack in everything. Other species had found it before. The Valkyrie had sent a research team 200,000 years ago. Every member of that team had gone insane within minutes of exposure. The Morath had lost an entire colony ship to the void. The Krell had declared the region forbidden and erased all records of its location. But Ji-woo was human. And human minds were different. Humans had evolved on a planet where survival depended on imagination. They had learned to see patterns in clouds, faces in shadows, meaning in random noise. They told stories to explain the unexplainable. They built religions and mythologies to give shape to the chaos of existence. When Ji-woo looked at the tear, her mind did not break. Instead, it reached out. It touched something ancient and vast and impossibly complex. And instead of shattering, it adapted. She began to see. The ship remained trapped at the edge of the void for 17 days. During that time, Jiwoo barely slept. She filled notebook after notebook with equations and diagrams that made no sense to anyone else. She talked to herself in languages that did not exist. She laughed and cried and whispered secrets to the empty air. The rest of the crew thought she had gone mad, just like the Valkyrie before her. But on the 18th day, the engine suddenly came back online. The ship jumped away from the void and returned to normal space. And when they finally made it back to Earth, Jiwoo had something that no other species in the galaxy possessed. She had the mathematics of disconnection. She called it nullification, the ability to sever any point in space from the hyperspace network, to cut a system off from the rest of the galaxy completely. No ships in or out, no communications, no trade, no contact, total isolation. But that was only half of what she had learned. The other half was even more important. She knew how to reverse it, how to reconnect what had been severed, how to open the doors again. In the wrong hands, this technology would be the ultimate weapon, a way to destroy empires without firing a single shot, a way to starve entire species into submission. The Earth government understood this immediately. They classified everything. The Maganwa's crew were sworn to secrecy. The recordings from the void were locked in the deepest vault on the planet. And Jiwoo was given unlimited resources and a single instruction: build it, but never tell anyone. For the next 60 years she worked. The quiet office was created to contain her research. Thousands of scientists came and went, each one knowing only a small piece of the puzzle. The full picture was known only to Jiwoo and the director, who oversaw her work. At first, that director was a military general who wanted to use the technology for war. But he died, and his replacement was different. Yoon Somi arrived at the quiet office in 2342. She was young for the position, only 42. But she had spent her entire career preparing for it. She had studied Jiwoo's early work as a child. She had dreamed about the void, about the tear, about the power that waited there. But unlike the general before her, Somi did not want to use nullification as a weapon of conquest. "We're not conquerors," she told Jiwoo during their first meeting. "Humanity has spent its entire history learning that conquest leads to ruin. Every empire falls. Every tyrant is eventually defeated. If we use this technology to dominate the galaxy, we will become exactly what we fear." Jiwoo was old by then, 83 years old, confined to a wheelchair, her brilliant mind beginning to fade at the edges. But she still understood. "Then what do you want?" she asked. "SOM." I sat down across from her. "I want to make sure that no one dominates anyone ever again. The elder races have ruled this galaxy for too long. They treat younger species as slaves and resources. They laugh at Earth because we have no power." She leaned forward. "I want to give us power. Not to rule, but to prevent ruling. Not to conquer, but to make conquest impossible. I want humanity to become the galaxy's failsafe. The circuit breaker. The force that says, if anyone tries to control everything, they will lose everything." Jiwoo was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, she smiled. "I have waited 60 years for someone to say that," she whispered. "The others all wanted to become emperors. You want to prevent empires. Yes. Then I will tell you the last secret. The one I have never shared with anyone." She reached out and took Sami's hand. The tear in space was not just a wound. It was a warning. The beings who created it, the ones who destroyed each other so completely that they tore holes in reality, they were not monsters. They were species. Species just like the Valkyrie, just like the Crow. They grew too powerful, too arrogant. They believed they could control everything. And in the end, they controlled nothing. Her grip tightened. Nullification is not a weapon. It is a reminder. A reminder that nothing is forever. that every connection can be severed, that every empire can fall. Somi nodded slowly. Then let us use it to remind them. And so they did. Over the next 5 years, 12 ships were built in secret. Each one carried a nullification device. Each one was crewed by volunteers who knew they might never come home. They scattered across the galaxy and hid in empty systems, in dead nebulas, in places where no one would ever look. And they waited. Meanwhile, Earth sent Ambassador Park Doyen to the Galactic Assembly. A quiet man, an unassuming man, a man who would sit in a broken chair at the back of the chamber and let everyone laugh at him, because that was the plan. Let them laugh. Let them mock. Let them believe that humanity was nothing, and when the time was right, show them the truth. 3 days passed. On Nexus Prime, the Galactic Assembly had mostly forgotten about the human ambassador. There were more important matters to discuss. Trade disputes between the Volthree and a minor insect species. A border conflict in the Outer Rim. The usual business of a galaxy that had been doing the same things for 100,000 years. Park Doyen waited patiently in his quarters. They were small, barely larger than a closet, located in the section of the station reserved for unimportant delegations. The walls were thin. He could hear the delegates from other Meyer species arguing next door. He could smell the strange cooking of a methane-breathing species down the hall. He did not mind. He had waited his whole life for this moment. 3 more days were nothing. On the morning of the 3rd day, he put on his best suit. It was simple and dark, the kind of suit that Earth diplomats had worn for centuries. No decorations, no symbols of rank, just clean lines and quiet dignity. Then he walked to the assembly chamber and requested an emergency session. The request was granted, mostly out of curiosity. No human had ever requested an emergency session before. Most species assumed that Dohyun wanted to complain about the mockery, to beg for respect, to make some emotional appeal that would accomplish nothing. They were wrong. The chamber filled quickly. Word had spread that something interesting might happen. Even the elder races attended, though they sat in their high seats with expressions of bored amusement. High Speaker Vorath, the Velthry crystal, was already making jokes with the Krull. Delegate Duhyan stood on the central platform and waited for silence. It took a while. No one respected him enough to stop talking quickly. But eventually, the noise faded, and he began to speak. 3 days ago, he said, I cast Earth's first vote in this assembly. It was a vote for fairness, a vote for equality, a vote that said every species deserves access to the hyperspace lanes, not just the 3 who happened to discover them first. The Krell delegate made a sound like grinding rocks. Laughter, perhaps, Doyen continued. You laughed at that vote. You called humanity a footnote. You said our voice meant nothing. It does mean nothing, Vorath said, his crystalline form chiming with amusement. You have no fleet, no power, no leverage. What can Earth possibly do to change anything? Dohyun smiled. It was a small smile, quiet and patient. The kind of smile that his grandfather used to wear when he was about to win a game of cards. Allow me to demonstrate, he said. He touched a control on the platform, and the chamber's main display activated. It showed a live feed from the Krell border system, a critical junction where 40% of galactic trade passed through. Ships of every species moved through the junction, entering and exiting hyperspace in a constant stream of commerce and travel. This junction, Doyen said, connects 400 systems. If it were to be closed, those systems would be cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Trade would stop. Communication would end. Ships in transit would be stranded in normal space, unable to reach their destinations. The Krell delegate rose from his seat. His massive body blocked the view of a dozen smaller species behind him. What is this? Are you threatening us? One human with no weapons, threatening the Krell? No, Doyun said. I am educating you. He glanced at a small device on his wrist. A simple timer, counting down. In approximately 60 seconds, he continued, a human vessel called the Sunflower will reach the Junction's relay beacon. That ship carries a device that Earth has kept secret for 60 years. A device that no other species knows about. A device that will change everything. The laughter in the chamber stopped. Varus' crystal form flickered with something that might have been unease. What device? What are you talking about? 45 seconds. The display showed a small ship approaching the Junction. It was tiny compared to the massive freighters and warships that surrounded it. Just a speck of metal in the vastness of space. That ship cannot threaten our Junction, the Krell delegate snarled. It has no weapons. Our scanners show nothing dangerous. 30 seconds. The chamber had gone completely silent. Every species watched the display with growing tension. You see, Doyun said, humanity discovered something a long time ago. Something in a region of space that every other species avoided. Something that drove the Velthari mad and killed the Morath. Something that your own people declared forbidden. Voreth's crystal form went pale. The void. You found the void. Yes, and where you found madness, we found understanding. Where you found death, we found knowledge. Because human minds are different. We see patterns where others see chaos. We find meaning where others find only noise. 10 seconds. On the display, the Sunflower had stopped moving. It floated near the Junction's relay beacon, completely still. And now, Doyun said, we will show you what we learned. The timer reached 0. On the display, nothing exploded. No weapons fired. No ships were destroyed. Instead, something much worse happened. The Junction simply stopped. Every ship in transit was ripped out of hyperspace and thrown into normal space. They tumbled and spun, their systems failing, their crews screaming in confusion. The relay beacon that controlled the Junction went dark. The hyperspace lanes that connected to it collapsed. Like strings being cut. 40% of galactic trade vanished in an instant. The chamber erupted in chaos. Species that had been allies for millennia turned on each other in panic. Delegates screamed into their communicators, trying to reach ships that could no longer answer. The Krell delegate roared in fury, demanding to know what had happened. Doyun stood in the center of the storm, calm and patient. This is nullification, he said, and his voice cut through the noise. The ability to sever any point in space from the hyperspace network. No destruction. No violence. Just disconnection. The chamber fell silent again. We could have done this to your homeworlds, Doyun continued. We could have isolated the Velthari, the Morath, the Krell. We could have cut you off from each other and watched your empires crumble into dust. He paused. We did not. On the display, something changed. The Sunflower had activated a second device. The Junction's beacon began to glow again. The hyperspace lanes reformed. Ships that had been stranded began to move again, their systems returning to normal. Because nullification can be reversed, Doyun said. We can sever, and we can reconnect. We can close doors, and we can open them. The power is absolute, and the power is ours. He turned to face Varus directly. For 60 years, humanity has hidden this capability. We sent no fleets. We built no empire. We sat in the back of this chamber and let you laugh at us. And the whole time, we held the key that could lock every door in the galaxy. Voreth's crystal form trembled. Why? Why would you hide such power? Because power without wisdom is destruction. Your elder races have proven that for 100,000 years. You control, you dominate, you crush anyone who threatens your position. But we are different. We do not want to rule. We want to ensure that no one rules. He stepped closer to the display, where the junction had fully restored. This was a demonstration. 30 seconds of disconnection. A reminder of what we could do. But we are not here to threaten you. We are here to offer you a choice. The chamber held its breath. Earth requests a new vote on hyperspace redistribution, Dahyun said. A fair vote. One where every species has equal weight. One where the elder races cannot simply dismiss the voices of the young. And if we refuse? The Krell delegate asked. Dahyun turned to face him. His expression did not change. Then you can explain to your children why they will never leave their home system again. You can watch your trade routes wither and your colonies starve. You can feel what it is like to be truly alone in the universe. He spread his hands. Or you can accept that the galaxy has changed. That humanity is not a footnote. That the era of elder race dominance is over. Voreth's crystal form flickered. The Marth delegation buzzed with frantic communication. The Krell delegate sat back down, his massive body suddenly looking smaller. Dahyun returned to the center of the platform. The choice is yours. But remember this. 3 days ago, you laughed. Today, you learned. Tomorrow, you decide. He bowed slightly. Earth will await your answer. Then he walked off the platform. Through the silent chamber, past thousands of species who now looked at him with something new in their eyes. Fear, respect, and the beginning of understanding. The galaxy burned with fear. Within hours of Dahyun's demonstration, the news spread across every communication network. Every species, from the mightiest empire to the smallest colony, learned what humanity had done. What humanity could do. And the reactions were exactly what Director Yoon Somi had expected. The elder races demanded war. High Speaker Voreth called an emergency meeting of the Velthari Council and declared that Earth must be destroyed before humans could use nullification again. The Marth Collective activated their hive mind and began calculating the fastest route to Seoul. The Krall mobilized their war fleets. Massive ships that had not moved in 10,000 years. But the younger species saw something different. They saw hope. For the first time in galactic history, someone had challenged the elder races and won. Someone had said no to their control. Someone had proven that power was not eternal. Messages flooded Earth's communication networks. Species that had never spoken to humanity before sent greetings, offers of alliance, requests for protection. A small rebellion began in the outer systems. Colonies that had been enslaved by the Krell for generations, rising up against their masters. The galaxy was splitting in two. In her underground facility. Yoon Somi watched the chaos unfold on a dozen screens. Her staff worked frantically around her, monitoring the movements of the elder race fleets, tracking the positions of the 12 hidden nullification ships, calculating scenarios and outcomes. Director, one of her analysts said, the coalition fleet is gathering near the Krell homeworld. Current estimates suggest over 40,000 ships. They will reach Seoul in approximately 18 days. Somi nodded slowly. Expected. They believe that if they destroy Earth quickly enough, they can eliminate the threat before we can respond. Can we stop them? Somi turned to look at the young analyst. His name was Choi Jun-soo, and he was barely 30 years old. He had joined the quiet office straight out of university, brilliant and idealistic, and he still believed that there were simple answers to complex problems. We could, Somi said. We could nullify every ship in that fleet. Cut them off from each other, strand them in normal space, let them drift until their supplies run out. We have the power. Jun-soo's eyes widened. Then we should do it. Before they reach Earth. And then what? Somi asked. We defeat this fleet, and what happens next? The elder races send another fleet. A bigger one. And we nullify that one too. And they send another. And another. Until we have isolated half the galaxy and made ourselves into exactly what we sought to prevent. She turned back to the screens. Power is not just about what you can do. It is about what you choose not to do. If we use nullification to win a war, we become conquerors. We become the thing we hate. And eventually, someone else will find a way to stop us, just as we found a way to stop the elder races. Then what do? Somi smiled, but it was a tired smile, heavy with the weight of 60 years of secrets. We make war obsolete. She activated a communication channel. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to Captain Han Mei, commander of the Sunflower.Mara. He was 45 years old, with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had spent 20 years in Earth's intelligence services, running operations that officially did not exist. She had killed people. She had saved people. She had done terrible things for good reasons and good things for terrible reasons. She was exactly the kind of person that Somi needed. "Captain," Somi said, "what is your current position?" 300 light years from the Velthari homeworld. Awaiting orders. The coalition fleet is moving toward Earth. They plan to destroy us before we can respond. Marie's expression did not change. I expected as much. Do you want me to intercept? No. I want you to go to Velthari Prime, not to attack. To talk. For the first time, something flickered in Marie's eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or curiosity. Talk, she repeated. The Velthari are the key, Somi explained. They are the oldest of the elder races, the most respected. If they can be convinced to stand down, the others will follow. Without Velthari support, the coalition will collapse. And if they cannot be convinced? Somi was silent for a moment. Then we will have to do something much harder. But I believe in you, Captain. I believe that you can find a way. Myrene nodded slowly. Understood. I will set course for Velthari Prime immediately. One more thing, Somi said. Do not threaten them. Do not show them the power we hold over them. They know what we can do. What they do not know is what we are willing to offer. And what are we offering? A way out. For everyone. The communication ended. Meanwhile, the coalition fleet continued to gather. Ships from a dozen elder race species joined the armada, their crews eager for the chance to crush the upstart humans. War songs older than Earth itself echoed through the communication channels, but not everyone was celebrating. Aboard the Velthari flagship, a female crystal named Kira Vorath, daughter of the High Speaker, watched the fleet with growing unease. She was young by Velthari standards, only 3,000 years old. And she had spent most of her life studying the ancient records of her people. She knew things that her father did not want to admit. The Velthari had not always been conquerors. In their earliest days, they had been explorers and artists. They had created music that could be heard across star systems. They had built sculptures that floated in the hearts of nebulas. They had believed in beauty and wonder and the endless possibility of discovery. But somewhere along the way, they had changed. Fear had crept into their hearts. Fear of other species, fear of change, fear of losing what they had built. They had closed themselves off, hoarded their knowledge, crushed anyone who threatened their position, and now a tiny species from an unremarkable world had exposed the truth. The elder races were not gods. They were just old. Old and afraid. Kyra's personal communication device chimed. A message from an unknown source, encrypted in a code that no Velthari system could break. She opened it. The message was simple. We do not wish to be your enemies. If you seek peace, meet us at the Shattered Moon. Come alone. Captain Han Mei. Kira stared at the message for a long time. Her father would call this a trap. Her people would call her a traitor for even considering it. But something in the message spoke to her. Something honest. Something real. She made her decision. 3 days later, her personal shuttle departed the flagship without warning. Her father raged when he discovered she was gone. He sent ships to pursue her, to bring her back. They were too late. Kyra Vorath arrived at the shattered moon, a dead satellite orbiting a dead star in a region of space that no one visited. And there, floating in the shadow of that broken rock, she found the Sunflower waiting for her. Captain Han Myray met her at the airlock. The human was small compared to a Velthary, barely reaching Kyra's shoulder. But her eyes were calm and steady, and her voice carried no fear. "Thank you for coming," Myray said. Kira's crystal form flickered with uncertainty. "You could nullify my shuttle. Strand me here. Use me as a hostage." "Yes," Myray agreed. "We could, but you won't." "No, because that is not why we asked you here." She led Kira into the ship, to a small observation room where stars glittered through a wide window. "We have studied your people," Myray said. "Not just your wars and your empires, but your history, your art, your music. We know what the Velthary used to be before fear took hold." Kira said nothing. Director Yoon believes that the Velthary can change, that you can lead the galaxy towards something better instead of clinging to something worse. But that cannot happen if we destroy each other. "Your people threaten to isolate us forever," Kira said. "How is that not destruction?" "It is not a threat," Myray replied. "It is a choice. We are offering the galaxy a new way forward. Equal representation, shared resources, an end to the domination of the few over the many. The elder races can either join that future or be left behind by it." She stepped closer to the Velthary. "But we need someone to help us make that argument. Someone the other species will listen to. Someone who can convince them that peace is not weakness." Kyra's form flickered again. "You want me to betray my people?" "No," Myray said. "I want you to save them." The silence stretched between them, filled with the distant light of dying stars. Finally, Kyra spoke. "Tell me more." The Coalition fleet stopped. 40,000 ships, the largest armada in galactic history, came to a halt just 3 days from Earth. Their crews waited in confusion. Their commanders argued in endless meetings. Their weapons remained powered, but UNFIRED. No one gave the order to attack. No one gave the order to retreat. They simply stopped. The reason was simple. Kira Vorath had returned. She did not return to her father's flagship. Instead, she broadcast a message across every communication network in the galaxy. Her crystal form shimmered on billions of screens. Her voice reached trillions of ears. "I am Kira Vorath, daughter of the High Speaker, heir to the Crystal Throne. I speak not for my father, but for myself. And I speak the truth." The galaxy listened. For 100,000 years, the elder races have told themselves that we are special, that we are chosen, that we have the right to rule because we were first. But being first does not make us wise. It only makes us old. In her underground facility, Director Yoon Somi watched the broadcast with tears in her eyes. Captain Han Myray stood beside her, exhausted but satisfied. Their gamble had paid off. "I have met the humans," Kira continued. "I have spoken with them, learned from them, and I understand what they are offering. Not conquest, not domination, but a chance for something better. A galaxy where every species has a voice, where every world has a future, where power is not hoarded by the few, but shared by the many." The Coalition fleet began to break apart. Ships from minor species, species that had joined out of fear rather than loyalty, quietly peeled away from the armada. They had heard enough. They wanted no part of a war against the people offering them freedom. I call upon the Velthary people to reject the path of war. I call upon all species to embrace the change that is coming. And I call upon my father, High Speaker Vorath, to stand down. On the Velthary flagship, High Speaker Varth watched his daughter's broadcast in silent fury. His crystal form burned with colors that no one had seen before, the visible manifestation of rage and betrayal. But he was not a fool. He could see the fleet dissolving around him. He could feel the tide of galactic opinion turning against the elder races, and he knew, deep in his ancient heart, that the old ways were ending, whether he wanted them to or not. He gave the order. The remaining ships powered down their weapons. The armada that had been sent to destroy Earth became nothing more than a collection of vessels drifting in space, waiting for new instructions on Nexus Prime. Ambassador Park Do-hyun received the news in his small, cramped quarters. He closed his eyes and let out a breath he had been holding for days. It was almost over. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Assembly gathered for the most important vote in its history. The chamber was fuller than it had ever been. Species that had never attended before sent representatives. Species that had been conquered and silenced for millennia finally had voices. The back rows, once empty except for unimportant delegations like Earth, were now packed with beings of every shape and color. Ambassador Park Do-hyun stood on the central platform. Beside him stood Kira Varth, her crystal form shimmering with new colors that seemed almost hopeful. Behind them, a holographic display showed the text of the new resolution: equal representation for all species, open access to hyperspace lanes, a mutual oversight council to prevent any species, including humanity, from using ultimate power for conquest, the end of elder race dominance forever. This vote will determine the future of our galaxy, Do-hyun said. It will decide whether we continue as we have for 100,000 years, with the strong crushing the weak, or whether we begin something new, something better. He looked out at the assembled delegates. Humanity did not want this power. We did not seek it, and we did not plan for it. We found something ancient and terrible, and instead of using it for war, we kept it hidden. We could have conquered you all. We could have become the new elder race, the new tyrants. His voice dropped. We chose not to. Kira stepped forward. And that is why I trust them, she said. Not because they are powerful, but because they had power and chose restraint. Because they could have destroyed us and instead offered us a hand. She turned to face the elder race delegations. My father is not here today. He has withdrawn to Valtteri Prime to consider his position. But I am here, and I vote yes. The chamber erupted in noise. Some cheered. Some booed. The Marth delegation buzzed with fury. The Krell sat in stony silence. One by one, the votes came in. The younger species voted yes, almost unanimously. They had waited too long for this moment. The elder races split. Some voted no, clinging to the old ways. But others, species that had seen the writing on the wall, voted yes. When the final count was announced, the resolution had passed, not unanimously. The Marth Collective stormed out of the chamber, vowing to reject the new order. Several Krell delegates did the same. The old powers would not surrender easily, but it was enough. The galaxy had changed. Do-hyun stepped off the platform and walked through the crowd of celebrating delegates. Some reached out to touch him, as if he were some kind of holy figure. He ignored them. He was not a hero. He was just a man who had done his job. He found a quiet corner of the chamber and sat down. Kira Varth found him there a few minutes later. You look tired, she said. I am tired, he admitted. I have been tired for a long time. She sat beside him, her crystal form humming softly. Will it work? She asked. This new order, will it actually change anything? Do-hyun thought about the question for a long time. I do not know, he said finally. Change is slow. The old powers will resist. There will be conflicts and setbacks and moments when it seems like everything is falling apart. He looked up at the stars visible through the chamber's grate. Windows. But I believe that we have planted something today. A seed. And if we tend it carefully, if we nurture it through the storms that are coming, it might grow into something beautiful. Kyra followed his gaze. My people used to believe in beauty, she said quietly. Before we became afraid. Before we forgot what it meant to create instead of control. Perhaps you can remember. Perhaps. Back on Earth, Director Yoon Somi stood in the observation room of the quiet office. The screens that had shown war fleets and crisis scenarios now displayed celebration and hope. Messages of gratitude flooded in from across the galaxy. Beside her, in a wheelchair, sat Baek Ji-woo. The old physicist was 93 now, frail and fading. Her brilliant mind had given humanity its greatest gift, and now that mind was slowly slipping away into the fog of age. But today, for a few precious moments, she was clear. Did we do the right thing? Ji-woo asked, her voice barely a whisper. Somi did not answer immediately. She had asked herself that question 1,000 times. Had they been right to keep the secret for so long? Had they been right to reveal it the way they did? Had they been right to use the threat of ultimate power to force change? I do not know, she admitted. We gave them a choice. We said, cooperate or be isolated. Work together or be alone forever. But we made the choice for them. Yes. Ji-woo was silent for a moment. Then she smiled. A small and tired smile. That is what parents do, she said. They make choices for their children. They set boundaries and enforce rules. Not because they want to control, but because they want their children to grow into something better. Somi looked at her. Are we the galaxy's parents now? No, Ji-woo said. We are just a reminder. The voice that says, you can be more than this. You can do better. You can choose peace over war, cooperation over domination, love over fear. She closed her eyes. That is enough. That is more than enough. The observation room fell silent. Outside, the stars continued to shine. Ships moved between worlds. Species that had been enemies for millennia began the slow, difficult work of becoming friends. Humanity remained small. One world, one moon, one unremarkable system in an unremarkable corner of the galaxy. But now everyone knew the truth. Earth was not the footnote. Earth was the failsafe. And as long as that failsafe existed, as long as humanity held the power to disconnect any system from the rest of the galaxy, no species would ever dominate the stars again. The void had torn reality. Humanity had learned its secrets. And with those secrets, they had not built an empire. They had built a door that could be closed or opened, a door that reminded the galaxy every day that nothing was permanent, that every connection could be severed. And that every species, no matter how old or how powerful, was ultimately alone unless they chose to be together. That was humanity's gift to the universe. Not power, not control. But choice. And choice, in the end, was everything.